Briefly, I'll talk about my journey. Briefly. So the seeking started when I was 19, after an experience that kind of fell into my laps. It was on the 24th of August. I was drawing in the living room. After a few hours, I felt quite tired. It was 9:30, but I was quite young, so it was a bit early for me to go to bed that early. But this tiredness. So I just go to bed, and while lying on the bed, in bed, I ask myself, what would happen if I stopped thinking? It's a question that rose from the bottom of our heart. So what would happen if I stopped thinking? At the moment I asked this, it just stopped, everything stopped. And when you stop thinking, there's a huge peace, very deep peace emerging. Wasn't familiar with that. Right after this peace, there's a huge wave of love, of bliss. From the bottom of my feet, from the tip of my hair. And right from that moment, everything changed, shifted. Ever since that point, I've always been quite tired because I realized that we're all gonna die, and I couldn't see any point in living in life. So from 10 to 19, I was always in some kind of melancholy. And from that point, from that experience, I knew that there was something else. It wasn't intellectual knowledge, it was knowledge. So from one day to another, I just started meditating. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what was meditating. So I just started sitting in my room, meditating more and more. Lots of habits from my daily life changed. From one day to another, I became vegetarian. I was very attentive to what my body wanted. So, from clothes that were black and quite tight, I changed. Shoes that were... I needed shoes that were very close to the floor. Anyway, I became very, very sensitive to things like that. And it was the beginning of that. It was so intense that at first I thought it was the end. I was such in a bliss. There was no more suffering. And this state lasted for 2 weeks. And then it started dissolving. So what happened after that was ups and downs, which pretty much every seeker's encounter. So it was quite extreme at first, but then it kind of calmed down. It was quite... Well, the peace becomes more and more stable. Peace is less and less impacted by what happens, and now. So it's a good example because there's lots of noises. There's a festival outside, so. It's just to let you know that this kind of sound, and I love it. I love when we're not in the perfect situation to taste peace. I like to see what frictions will come up. Is there any resistance left? I love looking at what is coming up. So back to the story. From 6 years, I just keep meditating quite intensively. At some point, I realized it's not enough. I need to meet someone because there's so many experiences I can't understand. First one was, I think it's called fragrance. Yes, it's smells. You start smelling smells, quite not quite, but subtle. I could smell them. Even people around me could smell them, but there was no reason for those smells to be there. So those are encouragement from the universe, let's say, so to speak. It's a few things, happening to let you know, keep going, you're on the right track. Sometimes you can feel a presence. I could feel presence. Or I could smell things from, like cloves smells, cotton smells. Anyway, I knew I wasn't alone, and sometimes it was so intense, you feel like you're going to go crazy. There's some clairaudience, like you hear sound present. So I really needed to meet someone. So my first master was called Michel, and he's from Belgium, and he taught me how to what's called get out of body, the astral projection, and that's the one thing that this is something that made me understand that what you see is not the absolute reality, there is something else. After quite some training, something like 1 year and 3 months, I actually achieved to get out of the body. At first, it goes quite. It's steps. First, it was just the arm. Are you familiar with that? No. Oh, okay. I'm just going to tell you a little bit more then. We don't have only a physical body. Every tradition talks about it. We do have other bodies. What we call death is just the physical body stopping to function. So the physical body stops, and then there's another body called the astral body that detaches itself. So when you are in the astral, does your ego and your mind follows? Yes. Yes, absolutely, because the me-I is still, this notion of me-I is still in the astral. When you reincarnate, you forget where you come from, but there's tendencies called vasanas in India. Like someone who has been playing a lot of piano the life before, then will be playing again. So no one is born with gifts that weren't practiced before, because that would mean that life is unfair, and that's not it. So there's a reason for things. Ego doesn't exist. It's an absolute construction that happens from the very moment you were born. When you're a child, at first, before 3 months, you don't have any ego, notion of ego. Ego starts to appear when you start making distinctions between things, between you and something else. But ego doesn't have any reality. The mind is just an aggregate of thoughts and sensations and beliefs. But if you look at it, you're not your name, you're not your physical form. Whatever is impermanent is not what you truly are. All right, we've actually jumped into quite some deep stuff, but So the me, I is not the self. Yeah, that's, yes. It feels like that's an interesting issue because it feels like we're two sometimes. Like there's the consciousness that is all wise and knowledge. And we sometimes feel like we're seeing ourselves and asking ourselves, why am I doing this like this? And awakening is just recognizing that there's a fictitious, false me from that me that is real, and to distinct them one from another. It's not that hard. Just notice what is permanent and what is impermanent. There's an Indian saying, Asatoma Sakamaya, which is lead me from what's unreal to what's true. And to sages in India, what's real is what is permanent. So the question is just, ever since you were born, what has always been here? Not much, yes. What is always here and never changes? Because your body, in 15 years, won't be the same, won't be here, because there's a complete replacement of your cells. So your body won't be there in 15 years. It's always fluctuating, but still there's something that is always here, and that is the challenge. That's the thing you need to find to finally feel peace and find peace, but because living in something that is always moving is quite tiring. We're all looking for something that can allow us to rest. A place where it's not moving too much, and when we are agitated, feeling that peace is good. Well, there's two planes at the same time. At the same time, there's the relative. There's the relative plan.
Il y a deux plans dans la vie qui ont lieu en même temps, tout le temps. Il y a le plan relatif des objets, des noms et des formes qui bougent en permanence.
With forms and objects that move all the time. And there's the absolute plan, the absolute level that is always here.
La conscience, souvent, focalise son attention.
And consciousness often focalizes its attention on objects, and it's forgetting itself. And that's where suffering arises from. It forgets its own nature. But right here, right now, there's something prior to whatever arises here. Same with when you're at the movie. Sages use that image. You are focused on the screen and on the images, the colors, the forms, the shapes on the screen, and we don't notice the screen itself. And yet the screen is way more important than the image, because without the screen, no images could come up, could appear. Are we agreeing on that? So to the mind, whatever is related to the consciousness doesn't really, it's not very important to the mind, but so to people starting to meditate, they think there is nothing, it's empty, it's boring, but it's just interpretations from the mind. But if you look closely, nothing is actually just an idea, it's a concept, it's not real, it's empty, that's not real, it's an idea. We need to realize consciousness is what is before even telling yourself there's nothing, it's empty. Same with, imagine you're a child 1 month
Vous voyez
old,
l'image devant vous.
and there's an image in front of you.
Vous voyez l'image devant vous. C'est cool, il y a plein de couleurs. C'est génial. Vous voyez l'image devant
So
vous.
look at the image in front of you right now.
Vous avez 1 mois.
You're 1 month
Si vous
old.
avez 1 mois,
So
vous
if
voyez les choses telles qu'elles sont sans conceptualiser les choses.
you look at things without
C'est-à-dire que là,
conceptualizing
vous allez voir,
things,
les formes
right?
et les couleurs, mais sans mettre d'interprétation par
So
rapport à
you're
la
going to
forme et la
see
couleur. C'est-à-dire que là,
colors,
vous allez pas
shapes, without
dessiner,
interpreting them.
en vous
It's-
disant, là,
it's
c'est
n-
une personne. Là, c'est
You're
quelqu'un.
not going to tell, oh,
Là, il y a
this is a
quelqu'un qui me
person,
regarde.
this is another
Et
one,
mettre des
that's one
concepts,
who's looking at me.
Et faire des distinctions, là c'est un homme, là c'est une femme, et de la façon dont elle s'habille, il y a bien de telle
Every
etc.
concept, like, you
Sans
know,
raconter
woman,
à chaque fois
man.
qu'on voit quelque chose.
Because
Il y a
every
des
time we
milliards de
look at
concepts en même
things,
temps qui
there's
viennent.
millions of
Impossible.
concepts, subconscious
Et tout ça-
concepts
et
that
tout ça,
are
on l'amène dans l'expérience. Mais c'est pas
emerging,
l'expérience réelle.
and we
L'expérience
bring
réelle,
that
c'est
into
qu'il
the
y a un
experience,
espace
but that's not the
de-
truth.
de couleurs et de formes.
The truth is there's just a space with colors and shapes, and everything is absolutely perfect in unity because everything is part of that space.
Du point de vue de l'espace, il n'y a pas de
From the
différence entre les deux.
standpoint of space, there's no such thing as
C'est très
objects.
clair, là. Du point de vue de l'espace, ou du point de vue de la conscience même,
Even from the
tout ce qui est dans le
consciousness
champ de conscience,
standpoint, whatever is in that field, there's no
et tout ce
difference.
qui apparaît là, il n'y a pas de différence.
And whatever appears here, there's no difference.
Bah, comme je disais hier à la conférence,
Like I said
ça
yesterday,
peut être compris même mentalement.
it can be
Il y
understood
a une vie qui circule dans toutes
mentally.
choses, et c'est la même vie
there's a life that is
qui
flowing
fait pousser la
everywhere.
plante que la vie qui fait pousser les cheveux sur ta tête.
The same life
Ou qui fait que tu
makes
vois
a
à travers tes yeux.
plant grow and
Et
makes
le problème de
your
l'ego, c'est qu'il attrape la vie
hair
et
grow.
il la fait sienne.
and the ego just grab onto life and makes it its own, like it's my life. I'm the one who's seeing, I'm the one who's doing, and I do have a future, and I do have something to achieve, and I need to have sense and meaning in my life. And keeps on and on.
Non, c'est pas vrai. La vie ne se
That's
pose pas
not
la
true.
question, faut que j'ai un sens,
Life
faut que j'ai quelque chose à
doesn't
accomplir.
ask
C'est le
itself
sentiment d'incomplétude et le
if
sentiment de vouloir accomplir
it needs
quelque
to do
chose qui
something.
fait qu'on se sent incomplet.
It's the sense of
C'est justement-
thinking
c'est
you
justement
are
ça.
incomplete that makes you
Il devrait
think
y
you
avoir
need
un
to
problème.
achieve something to make yourself complete.
Après,
or whole,
on peut vivre
but
comme ça.
Actually, you
courir
can
après
live like that if you feel like it, like, you know, running after an achievement and earthly achievements. There's nothing wrong with that. But to put that in the first plane or in your life, if you put your happiness on the level of doing something, then rather than just being, then that's never, you'll never be happy. That's not happiness. Every object is limited. What we are, consciousness, doesn't make any limitations. Doesn't put any limitations. You're the one putting yourself, shapes onto yourself and limitations on yourself. The baby doesn't think about that. It doesn't put any limitations on its body. Neuroscience say that every 3 seconds, a baby has a explosion of blissness into its mind. Same with adults, but it's 1 to 3 times a year. Because adults are limited in an ego where they think they're separated, and they start thinking, and then that's where suffering starts, when there's this feeling of separation. And when we talk about love, which is a subject, a matter that really imports to people, and love is actually the wish to find unity back. Love is not a feeling. It's not. Love is feeling unified. It's feeling it like you're in unity, and doesn't mean being just unity with another person. It's unity with everything. Maybe it happened to you looking at a landscape, or being in nature, or being in contemplating states. Artists often live that in contemplative states. Yeah, when something is really, really beautiful, it doesn't go through the mind. You actually fall into the heart. There's something opening up, and there's no more concepts, and you just feel unity. There's peace. And for a while, if we were to ask you, you know, right here, right now, is there something missing? And you would say no, because wholeness is there. And completeness is really just a concept. Same with meditation. After good meditation, like if you're in a deep state of peace, same question, is there something missing? No. It's always the mind that makes you think that there's something missing, and you need something to feel whole and complete. So going back to my personal story, so mystical experiences or altered conscious states, I had lots of, but I knew that it wasn't what I needed to feel the permanent peace. And it was always impermanent, you know. Even something absolutely ecstatic and incredible, it's still impermanent. Even the Kundalini is impermanent, is the only permanent thing in your life is the very fact of beingness. That's permanent. And to the mind, it has no sort of interest whatsoever. Nothing. No one's really takes savor in being. We feel like we have to go through something to actually just taste beingness. But no one really tends to just, you know, sit and taste just being. Well, I do feel that when I dance. When I'm dancing, I'm fully here. Yeah, there's concepts stop with the left brain that classifies things. There's this unity sense, yes.
T'es pas la seule au club. La plupart des gens s'ennuient quand ils sont assis.
But my body likes to walk, likes to move. It's easier to feel that unity while in movement rather than being static.
En fait, au début, on utilise des clés.
At first, we use tricks, keys, to awaken to what we are. At first, we go back and forth from the separation world to the unity world, and we go back and forth, and we taste like it's like we have two apartments, two flats. There's one with unity, one with separation, and at some point we get tired of getting from one to another. This from this world of suffering to this world of unity, and at some point we just think, what is permanent, what is always there, and you realize at some point that while you're dancing, you'll find the common denominator in between dancing and maybe just getting bored, being sitting down. There's something still that is here and sees the experience, that leaves the experience, that is prior to any experience, whatever the experience is. Same with the screen, the movie screen. There's something that is always there in you, that never moves, and which leaves whatever appears. And this background screen, the shift is when this background is actually the first thing that you see. I am this, that taste every experience. And you could say that the second level of that, or state, would be to reintegrate that world. So when you realize what your true nature, essence is, then you see it everywhere, you realize it in every single thing in front of you.
Souvent, les sages emploient la métaphore de la vague, de l'eau.
Sages use that metaphor of water and wave. Like objects are wave. Every object is a wave, like a flower, everything, humans. Even inanimate objects. There's also a conscious in it. There's quantum physics say so now. So when you go within, you connect. It's like you connect to this water, and sometimes you go that deep that you touch the ocean itself, and you realize that everything is ocean. And this is where it clicks. Like you realize that everything is you. Are you saying that you? Well, I'm not established in that realization the same way as Gérald is, but it's known. It's not mental. It's known what I am, but still sometimes there's still contractions. Like, you know, I can feel that my body is moving, and I can feel it a little bit more than usual. So I can feel like I'm more densified. It doesn't change much, but still, I don't have much effort to do, or many efforts to do, to see you and see myself in you. Even in meditation, there's no more meditation anymore. It's not meditation anymore. You just close your eyes and I can see that every time I close my eyes, what is seeing has always been here ever since I was born. I've always been the same. I don't know how to explain that, but I've always been the same. And it's actually the same for you. There's something in you that's never changed ever since you were born. I don't know if it talks to you, if you can hear that, but to explain that, I use the example of now. So to the mind there is a time, but to consciousness there isn't. The mental is the mind. To the mind is the time is an idea. Are you okay with that? On your direct experience, have you ever lived a past? And you'll never live a future, right? You're just living right here, right now. So how many nows were they just to get from before to now? Just one, right? There's also now. There's only now. There's no time, and now is absolutely continuous. There's no discontinuity in it. And this permanence, this continuity in seeing and in being shows us that there's something that is very stable within us and that never moves. And this force, which allows you to see and be, is not personal, and that's the problem that we might have sometimes. We think that life is like my life. It's not my life, it's that you are life. You're not just a little life isolated from every others, but you are life itself, that the very force that creates activity, the activity of the body, of the heart, and that makes your hair grow. It's not mental, it's way beyond the mind. And the proof that you are the life beyond the mind, in deep sleep, do you exist? You do, right? There's no need to think about it, right? You do exist when you can't, you do exist in deep sleep. You know that you are. Yet there is no mind, and there's no perceptions. So how do you know? That's because it is. That's it. We know it because we've slept well.
Donc le fait d'être, en fait,
So the beingness happens on its own, spontaneously. And there's no effort to do in life. Because the very fact of being I know that we feel like we struggle in life, but if you look closely, most of the time, most of your life happens on its own. And thankfully, thank God. And it's not the one who's doing your body breathe or it's not, you don't make your body breathe or make your brain work, it just happens. And there's a deep gratefulness in it. Do you have any questions? You talked about being bored while meditating. So does that mean that we don't go deep enough to see the screen? Right? Yep. I can see that there's more joy. There's more joy in watching the movie than the screen. And my question is, what is the joy? Where is the joy in watching the screen? It's a metaphor, but more precisely, it's not the movie, it's the light that is projected onto the screen. But the joy comes from recognizing that you are eternal. That's where the joy is. The movie, well, you get bored of it. The vast majority of people on this earth are not enjoying this movie. There's lots of suffering. We think that it's real because there's the five senses, but it's just a movie. And most of the time it's quite painful to people, and there's joy in knowing that you are the spectator of the movie. It changes the whole perspective on the movie. Would it be fun to watch a movie and be in a war movie and risking actually taking a bullet? What is fun is that you are sitting in a chair and you're watching a movie and you know that you don't risk anything. The creation was made for that. There was a necessity for consciousness to create duality, to see itself. So there's a joy. So of course there's joy in this world. There's a joy of being here. But there's even more joy than that, knowing that it's a movie. But when you are involved in the suffering, most of people are in pain. Who ever lived a life without suffering? Even the richest and the princes, everyone has problems. The only way to get out of problems is to realize that you're not in the movie. Do you get what I mean? And also there's a joy that is beyond objects, objectless. The blank screen is a metaphor, but it goes beyond a screen. What you are is pure joy. Baby that is 1 month old, there's no doesn't feel thrill in objects, and I can actually see that this world might be very painful when you get out of your mother's womb. But joy is your very nature. Consciousness is joy. Indians say Satchitananda, being, knowing that you are, consciousness, and the joy of knowing that you are, Satchitananda. In deep meditation, you can easily taste it. Take away the idea that you're bored, because that's just an idea.
là, tu vas voir que juste derrière ça, pouf,
And right beyond that, there's
la plénitude.
blissfulness and completeness, wholeness. And my question was, so I got that we have only one consciousness. So if there's consciousness in multiple forms, how come I don't have others' abilities then? Because you were talking on the forms level.
Alors au niveau du ressenti, tu peux vivre des choses.
On the feeling level, on the you can actually experience things like with animals. Yeah, you can.
Tu peux. Quand je me balade dans un parc, par exemple,
when I walk in a park,
si je vois à partir de la conscience,
if I
donc à partir du
see from the,
si je regarde
if I see from consciousness, if I look at a tree from there, then I know that I'm there, I'm here.
C'est une sensation, c'est difficile à décrire, mais déjà.
It's impossible to describe, but
mais les objets qu'on appelle, qui
well,
bougent pas et qu'on l'air.
just so you know, objects that we think are not really fun or nice, well, there's a huge joy in them. There's completeness in trees. Same with flower. A flower tastes life in a very thrilling way. Same with butterfly. I didn't experience it with asphalt, but still with a tree, often I've experienced things like that. But I assume it would be working with and happening with asphalt. It can't be understood with the mind. It's not something that you can perceive with. It's something that comes from the heart. It goes through the heart. It's as if you were falling in love of the tree, with the tree and the bird, the butterfly, and you leave what it's going through. But yes, you can feel what people are feeling. It happens with lots of people.
Comment? Quand il voit un humain, il s'en fout parce qu'il n'a pas de mental, donc il n'est pas dans le concept, l'arbre.
The tree doesn't think anything when it sees a tree, because there's no mind, but it feels a great connection with the sky and the ground. And when I look at a tree from consciousness, I can feel very grounded and very connected to the sky. I can feel that the food is everywhere. I feel fed by life. I can feel myself having roots and leaves. It's a very joyful sensation. So a tree doesn't classify, it's not classifying anything. So does it have any sensations? No, you need a mind to have sensations. It only leaves wholeness. There's only humans that are torturing themselves.
Au niveau de la conscience, en fait, j'ai jamais été là quand un arbre a été coupé, mais j'imagine que.
I've never been there when a tree was cut down. There is suffering in the plant world.
Je pense qu'il percevrait quelque chose.
I think it would perceive something, but it wouldn't be seen as suffering.
Je pense que les végétaux perçoivent des choses.
Yes, plants perceive things, and they do emit waves. If you put a light near a leaf, there's something happening. There is something circulating, yes, absolutely. It's very subtle, very beautiful. Everything is in communication all the time, even in. We think that the body here is separated, actually, right now, but from the direct experience point of view, look at it. Close your eyes if you need to, but even with open eyes, try and find limits, boundaries, or into your in your body. Get within, take away the image of the body that you have, and try and find where there is a contour, a limit to yourself. There's only perceptions, and if you go into perceptions, you realize that there's nothing solid. It's only vibrations. It's exactly what quantum physics talk about now. Every perception, when you rub your hands like that, you're actually not touching yourself. It's scientifically proven. You're not touching yourself. Nothing touches nothing. You just perceive movement. It's electricity, vibration pushing themselves away from each other. And if you go into it, you'll get that it's very vibratory. Go into it, and it's the same for everything. It's also the same when you think, I'm bored while meditating. It's only a frequency, a vibration. And it's a really good thing to do, try and go into that thought.
Ça vaut le coup de rentrer dedans pour se rendre compte de quoi elle est faite. Et ça amène...
Go into it and see what it is made of, because it does get to enlightenment. So just right here, right now, can you hear that there's sounds? And look at the mind, what the mind is telling you. Oh, there's noises. Why is there music? I would like it to be different. Insatisfaction is to want something different from what is. Look at this mechanism, go into it, and you realize it's always the same. It's always a movement, an energetic movement, a vibration. And it's not our doing, it's just a program, it's just a pattern. People think that they do think on their own. We often think, I create my own thoughts. That's absolutely wrong. You don't create any thoughts. I know it might sound weird. We think that we are the author of our thoughts, but that's not true, and we can prove it right here, right now. Okay. Tell me, what is going to be your next thought? There's no thoughts. Yeah, that's true. There's nothing. Why? Because the mind doesn't exist. All right? All right, you're all awakened. You can go home now.
Okay. Donc,
it is important to realize that we are driven by a flow. We're not driving the embarkation on the river by ourselves. The vast majority of what happens just happens. The same as a bird is just doing his nest, or the flower blossoms. It's same with awakening, enlightenment. It happens on its own. And this idea of Satchitananda, that we are Satchitananda, this nature that is hidden to ourselves, or, well, vaguely veiled. So we live that wholeness when we're a baby, and so we go through a phase where we put on programs and patterns that are wrong. So pure consciousness, being pure consciousness, why would we what's the point of believing that we're not? It's the absolute joy of rediscovering, recognizing yourself.
Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas davantage de joie quand tu ne connais pas le cadeau?
When you don't know the gift, isn't it even more joyful when you don't know what the gift is going to be? You know, you're in front of a package and you have to unwrap it, and every part of manifestation is a part of yourself, and the human has the capacity to rediscovering itself. It's as pure consciousness. From the very ability to be both into the relative and the absolute, to express itself as pure consciousness and knowing it. I like your idea of presenting consciousness as the gift and the ego is just the paper wrap. And without an ego, you wouldn't be able to go back home to get enlightenment. Humanly speaking, you can't be here without an ego. It's also an individuality sense. You need it to talk. But what's fascinating is consciousness can live on the human level on 4 different levels. From the either forget yourself completely into the material world, which is vast majority. So forget that you are pure consciousness and live as if you are limited. Or you can either live on a state where you forget completely about the world. So modified consciousness states. So you can live without any senses, just being pure consciousness, or you can live while being in both states. So I can see the screen and the movie at the same time. Or you can live in the image everywhere at the same time. It's quite hard to explain, but being the image, recognize that every object is that very consciousness. There is a fusion, there is unity, permanent unity. The difference with what I've been saying right before, there is a plane of consciousness where you can see the relative and the forms, and yet at the same time you can feel that is permanent and never impacted by anything, not affected by anything. And the very last step I'm talking about is when the fusion appears, or communion. And so you can feel the densest to the most subtlest. You can embrace. It's embraced. There's a fusion of everything, and everything is sacred. There's nothing that is less or better or all human things. There's nothing that is not spiritual, doesn't exist. We think that we are on a spiritual path. We think that we need to do things a certain way. Yes, it has its place when we are seeking on a spiritual path, but up to a point where it doesn't mean anything. Everything is sacred.
Non, d'accord, c'est juste, je suis content, tu vois. D'accord, ok. J'ai retrouvé mon statut, tu vois, d'enfant avant Noël, qui va bientôt avoir...
Do you have a question? No, I'm sorry. I'm just happy as a child. I feel like I've got my status as a child, my child status back.
Et en fait, non, vas-y.
La question, être soi.
So being yourself with others is complicated. Is it selfish? It's very contradictory. I think that the more you're yourself, the better. But at the same time, For instance, I want to be alone for 50 years. We can see that they're selfish because they're not theirs with others. Well, that's very human to think that.
Être avec les autres?
It's not always simple to be with people.
Oui, non, mais ça dépend où on se place.
Depends on where you look things from.
Il y a 4 étages dans la conscience, donc ça dépend d'où on se place, si tu veux.
So there are 4 stages. So yes, on a level, it can be painful, and there's preferences.
Tu vois bien que, enfin même c'est très simple à voir. Tu vois bien que lorsque tu juges, lorsque tu dis c'est pas facile, ça c'est des pensées, c'est des concepts.
When you judging, you can see that it's the mind, and you know that it's not the truth, it's not reality. Life gives the same force to criminals and to saints. It's the same current going through them. It's the same vital force. So there's, from the highest point of view, there's no difference. I know a master in India that went to his master and saying, "Oh, I do have a problem with others. I don't like the way they act. They don't accept me." And the sage listens to him for an hour. And after an hour, the master asked, "But what others?" So as soon as I say I'm judging, it's not good. No, because you're judging yourself. Like judging is not good, is a judgment. There's no such thing as good or bad. That's not the question, really. My question is about unity. Unicity. I'm talking about unity, not unicity. Unity doesn't mean. Well, the waves are never the same, right? The surface doesn't have to be the same, but within the wave, it's always one, it's always the same water. Doesn't mean that you have to live with people with who you have problems. You can choose to live one way or another. To be oneself is to go through the heart more than go through the mind, and knowing that when someone tells you something, sometimes people project their own patterns and mechanisms onto you, and they want you to believe in their dream. The ego, the illusion, the ego, people want to drag you into their dream, their illusion. You don't have to believe everything that you're told. I went to the Himalayas for 3 years, so I do know, the whole speech about, oh, you're selfish, you're going into caves and ashrams. And I can tell you there's no easy path, and those people never been to forests for 40 days like I did, and believe me, there's no place you can go where you can escape the mind and the ego, and it's as hard being a hermit or a monk is as hard as being in a family, having a family. You're always dragging and carrying your ego with you wherever you are, even at the very feet of a master that is fully realized. And I do know lots of disciples being at the feet of the masters thinking, all right, they're saved, but believe me, that's not true. And I've seen a lot of them crying, thinking that going to the feet of the masters, they would be delivered, liberated. But no, suffering is always here. As long as you don't look at yourself, like the only way to get away from pain is to actually look at the suffering, go to the resistance, look at it. Just go into it. Why isn't it easy? It's not something mental. Just look at how does it express itself in the body, how does it express in the mind. It's just programs, mechanisms, memories, or even, cellular things that we are carrying. It's just energy which asks to express itself. It's just knocking on your door. I want to get out to liberate you. Because emotions is not here to bugger you, it's actually here to help you. So the more you try to resist, the harder it's going to knock on the door. But the more you welcome it, the quickest it's going to go pass, and the more you're going to know yourself, and the less resistance you'll have. You can't push away, big matters, big files, like for too long. Every sages say the same. To liberate yourself from suffering, there's the only way. We're not born to suffer. We weren't born to suffer. Samadhi is a state of mind where there's no more concepts, no mind, there's no world, there's no time, there's no space. It's like the deep sleep state, but you're conscious. But you do need an ego in life, because you can't interact with people with that ego. There's the sense of individuality with ego, and you need a little bit of it. And I need to feel like I'm a little bit here and you're a little bit there to be able to communicate. Because if I put myself onto the absolute level, it doesn't have anything to say. It doesn't say a thing. So I need to go down a bit and connect a little bit of things to be able to talk. And it's not thinking. I'm not thinking when I'm talking in conferences.
La conscience chante. En fait, la conscience est tout. Donc là, on peut dire qu'elle s'exprime aussi, tu vois. Mais je veux dire que du point de vue le plus absolu, on peut vraiment rien dire. C'est pour ça que.
On the very absolute level, you can't say a thing, really. There's nothing to say. So that's why the mind is struggling so much, and that's why I've been struggling for 17 years. We try to grab it, to get a hold of it.
Non, vas-y, explique justement.
I don't get what you say, but it's good.
La clé, elle est là.
Yeah, that's the key.
C'est quand on sait plus.
The key is when you don't know. So I can see that there's something I got, I understood how it's functioning, how it's working, all those experiences, or how they...
Exactement.
And that's when you don't understand things that... So I understood that when I don't understand, that's good. I'm thinking way too much. And even if I have a mind that goes very, very fast, I now know that it's good not to know. And like a love story, a love relationship, it works when I don't understand. I keep on looking, but I can see that it's because I don't understand that it works. It's same with friends and... I've been seeking for 17 years, and when it shifted, I didn't get it. I really didn't understand it. I didn't understand that it happened. It took me weeks. Thankfully, I have guides that gave me confirmation, but at the same time, we know. Once, a friend of mine told me, he told me, that's a bit strange what you talk about, what that experience you tell me about. No, that's not an experience. But I was thinking maybe it can be a samadhi state. No, that's not a samadhi. It's not an experience. It's beyond. It's prior to experience. It's not possible to understand for the mind. It's not an object. You can hold it. You can grab it. Because the mind and the ego think they can attain something by focusing on objects. While focusing on something and thinking that it's going to reveal itself right in front of the attention, but the fact is, for it to reveal itself is you have to go the other way, back to yourself, and realize that you are attention, like the force behind your eyes is there already. And if humans could let things be the way they are, this beingness,
non, c'est même pas un sentiment, mais même état d'être, ça va pas parce qu'un état, ça va et ça vient. Mais si on pouvait laisser juste le fait d'être, voilà, le maintenant, juste être comme il est,
if we could let
le conceptualiser, sans le modifier,
beingness
sans
be,
vouloir l'améliorer,
without trying to make it better, change it, we try to make life better. When we meditate, we tend to want to make peace better. We think that we are kind of Superman. And because we humanly are able to make meditation better, we're going to be better, but that's not it. The only way for it to work is to let go of everything, is to be in pure vulnerability as a child, to the point where all the shields that we have to and put on ourselves to protect ourselves have to drop. And it's quite easy actually, and at this point it's very joyful. All the actions that we're doing are not really our actions, but rather conditionings from our parents or from situations. If you were to have a child, would you try and not give him any kind of, or her, any kind of conditioning? Like, would you try and not have the wrapping paper given to your child? That you don't have to talk to your child. You don't have to explain to him that he's got an ego. Life does it on its own. But have you noticed how there's alternative schools coming up and emerging, and the child is actually not taught but allowed to be doing and to be learning by playing. A child learns on its own. It's hard for the parents to hear that, but he doesn't need his parents. The parents are here to put some framework there, because if the child was always in the absolute, he wouldn't be conscious of the body and would, cross the road, and he wouldn't care about dying. But the parent is only here for the, the tiny framework, but all the rest, it's like a plant. You just make sure that everything's okay, but you let it. So, the question is, do children need a framework, or well, a minimum of it, but actually, lots of native people, and we realized that those native people would trust entirely their child, and could see that they were playing nearby running up to the edge of it, and nothing was happening, and there was a complete trust. The lack of trust is always the mind. All the doubts and the limitations are coming from the mind. But I do know children who are lost without some sort of frame or Well, I know someone who's struggling because, because of the lack of... It's someone that is absolutely wonderful, but still she can't do...
Le cas d'encore, bon ça je suis pas sûr que ça soit vraiment fondamentalement nécessaire. Par contre, ce qui est fondamentalement nécessaire,
What's fundamentally necessary is trust and love. Well, actually, love itself. That's the very first food that we need. As long as we are not conscious of the unity that we are, we feel that we need love and we want love. And I've heard about child dying because they were lacking love. Yeah.
Peut-être une dernière question.
How about one last question?
Déjà 1 heure, ça passe. Moi, pour moi, ça passe comme ça.
So,
je n'ai pas choisi.
So what made you want to share about this? I didn't choose it. It happened. So the self doesn't talk, but when I was 19 and I had this experience, I knew that this union would happen, and I knew, and I had a confirmation. Yeah, sages I've met told me they would happen, and I actually went to India to become a monk. And I meet a monk in India. So I meet one master, and so I want to be a monk. Well, you will get married, and I was, wow. And after a while, just 2 seconds afterwards, it just burst into laughing, saying, "You'll be married with God." So I knew this would happen. And back when I was 19, I also knew that I would talk to everyone about it. It was a wish from the heart. I want to marry with you, this light, and after I will talk about it. Ever since it's talking on its own. There's lots of texts that are coming to me. Just like in 3-4 months, there's a book that was written. I wasn't doing anything. I was just waking up at 5 in the morning, and I was grabbing a pen, and it would just write itself on its own. And I put it on Facebook, and I realized that it was people were moved by it. Is it some sort of automatic writing? So it's not an entity that is helping me. Automatic writing is actually some sort of entity that is talking through you. But that's not what I was living. It's the heart. It was actually the heart that was talking. The consciousness was talking to consciousness. Consciousness was talking to everyone that wants to express itself. Same way with right now. And there's some sort of double joy. The joy of this comprehension that is not mental, and the joy of sharing. That's the reason why we're here too. Incarnation's goal is to overflow, to realize wholeness, and from this wholeness to overflow to share with everyone.